To hear more about lived experience of homelessness, we're now going to hear from Anne Wright. Over to you, Anne. Anne, yep.
I'm not very good on computer skills, and I will talk about that actually at some stage. As I said, I'm very pleased to be here and to talk about what happened to me. As the previous speakers have said, there have been, it's a growing cohort, and it actually affects many, many women. My story was that I was a graduate. I have a Bachelor of Arts. I worked in professional jobs, earned a great wage. I had a workplace serious incident, and I was out of the workforce for 9.5 years. Gradually, I decided that I would retrain. Now, during this period of time, I also was medically seeing specialists for various reasons. And I paid for those services. Eventually, I ran out of money. I did not touch my super, but I ran out and used all my savings to actually, make sure I had access to those medical services in the private field. Then I retrained as I was on Centrelink, and that was absolutely horrible because you are funneled. Women that I was with in that organisation were funneled. We were actually trained in a very poorly skilled, poorly trained, and a low-paying casual workforce, aged care. And because it was casual, the work was quite infrequent, and you were working with some very, very difficult and people that really needed specialist attention. So that happened. At that stage, I was struggling. I didn't think I was struggling, and I also thought that something would happen. As I said, I'd used up all my funds, and eventually I started living from payday to payday. What was happening then was that things would go by the side. My dental care stopped, my car in terms of maintenance, petrol, etc. And, you stop going out because you don't have any funds to go out. You do not attend any social functions. You can't buy a present. It's just, you don't go to Christmas because you can't contribute. Then it happened that, food insecurity came into it, where you are not being able to buy the food that you want, or more importantly, the food that you need for your health. So you end up having really crappy meals, like Vegemite on toast, and it was just horrific. I then actually got another job, trying to get out again of that rut of being in that low income, terribly trained, patronised, thing. The message that it sent to women clearly was, you are not valuable. You are not worth being paid any good amount of money. And not only that, we are going to make sure that you work with even more vulnerable people, and bad luck for them if you're not trained. So I ended up getting a bit of a job in the NDIS. I completed a 2-week training course for that job, and there were, again, all women in the group. We were forced to do it because of mutual obligation. If we didn't do that course, we were going to have our benefits suspended. So there was a group of women, again, who were funneled into this job, poorly trained, and the wages weren't that crash hot. And you are working with people that have complex needs. I still am worried that perhaps in that job I did a lot of damage to people because of poor training. I wasn't a medical person, I wasn't a nurse, and yet I was working with people who had palliative care, who had really complex physical disabilities as well. Older women who were at the end of their life, and I found it to be quite distressing, actually. Then because of the positions being casual, and because you're desperate, and desperate is the word, you're living from pay to pay, you're isolated, your mental health goes downhill, your physical health goes downhill as well, because you're not eating properly, you're not doing much really except working. And that job was not very good either. Eventually I was made redundant as I'd put in too many critical incident reports where I was, there were no ratios. I was working again like one worker to 7 people with a range of complicated medical needs. And being made redundant, I had got a payout, I think it was around 2,000. And at Centrelink, I was not allowed to use that because I had to wait. Well, sorry, I was allowed to use it, but I had to wait 12 weeks before I was eligible for any sort of benefits. So then again, that money went on rent and basic necessities. What happened then, after that ran out, again, I was sort of always hopeful that something would come up, but it didn't. I started to panic. I really started to panic, and you're not thinking properly, which is something that people don't know. I referred to it as like I was a bit of like I was floundering, and I didn't know where to go. I actually tried ringing services in Geelong, and I actually used a telephone book. I was asked to say that because it's so embarrassing. Computer-wise, I'd only done very minor training courses and only involved like surfing and email, that sort of thing. Not filling out forms that is required today, not scanning documents that you might need for Centrelink, etc. And all told, the benefit that I received from Centrelink and from what I was paying in rent, I was paying $275 a week in rent. And with the benefit, I was paying $71 in direct debits, and I actually had $1 debt left over. I had nothing to live on, nothing. I had no savings, nothing. I was isolated and, it wasn't going well. In frustration, after I rang around Geelong services, and I also tried a financial counsellor, welfare, I rang a very dear friend in Canberra, of all places, and just said, Carol, look, I just don't know what I'm going to do. I present well, I'm intelligent, but I can't seem to get out of this rut. And she said, okay, hang on. And then she rang me back and gave me a phone number and an email address. And that was to HAAG, Housing for the Aged Action Group in Victoria. So I sent an email, and I kept the email brief, but I basically made the following points. Single, had low paid job, no money, no access to money, and that, I couldn't afford to live there because of, I was in debt $1. I explained that. I said I was socially isolated, which I was. And then I said, I can't afford to stay and I can't afford to leave. How was I going to afford removalists? How was I going to afford, all those sorts of things? I couldn't afford bond, or anything like that. So HAAG returned my email within I think it was 24 hours for 2 days, and that was working days, stating that I would have a worker contact me and we would discuss, whether I was eligible and what my issues were. And within 5 working days, a worker from HAAG had come down to my place in Geelong, on the outer skirts of Geelong, had a chat to me, and also had, assessed whether I was right, asked lots of questions, and said, yep, okay. I immediately felt relief, particularly, oh, thank God. Then it came down to things like the bond. I had to hand over the bond via VCAT. The worker attended both services or both court hearings with me in regards to that. We spoke a lot about what my needs were in terms of, I had the medical needs. I dropped my specialists. I wanted to stay near the Royal Melbourne because that's where they're public specialists. And I wanted safe housing, actually, and I wanted secure housing. So, yes, the property came up, and the worker picked me up in Geelong, brought me to Melbourne. And even that travelling was very interesting because that's when you talk about issues and support. It was also getting me ready and supporting me for what other networks I needed to actually contact once I was in Melbourne. The other factor, which I cannot highlight enough, is that I had no contact with a lot of these services for a long, long, long time. So I refer to it as navigation. The navigation that HAAG worker offered and the support was truly great. And, I think at my age, it was a bit of a godsend. As I said, not very computer literate, not a fay with what was being around. I didn't push the issue of support when I contacted the services in Geelong. I didn't even say, will you ring me back, please? I accepted that they said, no, we don't have anything. And so I took this unit, and HAAG organised the bond, rent in advance, and the removalist. I had to have packers, and I arrived. And you're a bit nervy when you shift, particularly to a new area. And I sat down and I thought, oh, I'm going to burst into tears. I've arrived in this new area. Oh, it's been a big day, a past few months. What am I going to do? And then there was a knock on the door, or the intercom went. Lo and behold, there was the HAAG worker, like after hours a little bit, not, and hi, Marianne, how are you going? How are you settling in? Just wanting to make sure you have milk, coffee, toilet paper. Very nice, and it was a very nice and lovely personal touch. And that's another issue I want to tap into. People talk about services now and they don't really respond to your personal needs. And one of the issues I still want to talk about is that, women have lots of life shocks, and what happens is as you age, they can be cumulative and you don't really realise what's happening. So you can be, at HAAG we've had many women who have been working in the private industry. They've had businesses that have gone bust, women in marriages, women who don't have super from, been out of the workforce for so long. So it was really critical that the response that I received from HAAG was personalised to what my needs were. And I found that to be a great support. Once I arrived in Melbourne, there were still some issues around isolation, but with, again, HAAG, the worker tapped me into the resources and provided referrals. And so it was a smooth way, that navigation. HAAG is a membership-based organisation and they have meetings every quarter. And so I started to go to those meetings and it was great. I met many women in situations like mine. And I decided to join the Committee of Management, and I did. One thing I have so many things I want to highlight, so people will have to ask me questions in the Q&A.
Marianne, I think we're going to have to give people the opportunity to ask you a couple of questions after listening to that.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Marianne. I could hear in the emotion in your voice the different levels of experience that you had during that journey that you just painted for us, and the relief at the point where someone was providing you that personalised service for safe, secure and affordable housing.